I never imagined that installing a simple monitoring program on my computer would be the key to exposing a web of betrayal that would change everything. As I sat in that church, staring at the cross, desperately seeking answers about why my world was crumbling around me, a voice whispered the solution I had forgotten.
Story based on true events. Names, locations, and some facts have been altered to preserve the privacy of those involved.
My name is Emily. I'm 22 years old, and everything I'm about to tell you started on what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday morning in downtown Portland, Oregon. I had just started my final year studying business administration at Portland State University when I landed an internship that felt like winning the lottery. Henderson Home Furnishings, one of the biggest online furniture retailers on the West Coast, had accepted me as a trainee in their e-commerce division. I remember walking through those glass doors on my first day, my portfolio clutched against my chest, trying to project confidence I didn't entirely feel. The building towered over the industrial district, all steel and windows that reflected the gray Oregon sky. Inside, the open floor plan buzzed with the energy of a company that was going places. Rows of desks stretched toward floor-to-ceiling windows, and the smell of fresh coffee mixed with the faint scent of new carpet. They assigned me to the data analytics department as a trainee. The position didn't come with any guarantees of permanent employment, but I had always been the kind of person who threw everything into what I did. Ethics were non-negotiable for me, but hard work? I would give them every ounce of effort I had. Henderson Home Furnishings wasn't just any company. It was a name that carried weight in the Pacific Northwest business community. Getting hired here permanently would set the trajectory of my entire career. I need to tell you about two people who would become central to everything that happened next. The first was Jonathan Drake. Everyone called him John. He was the regional operations director, which meant he was my supervisor's boss. John was in his early 30s, single, and the subject of constant speculation among the women in the office. I'm not exaggerating when I say at least half the female staff had tried to catch his attention at company happy hours or found excuses to stop by his office. But John maintained such professional boundaries that some people actually questioned whether he was interested in women at all. In the 6 months I'd been there, I never once saw him leave with anyone or even engage in flirtatious banter at the coffee machine. He had this presence about him, the kind that made you straighten your posture when he walked into a room. Dark hair always perfectly styled, suits that fit like they were custom-made, and a voice that carried authority without ever needing to be raised. But it was his eyes that struck me most. They were the kind of brown that looked almost amber in certain light, and when he focused on you during a conversation, you felt like the only person in the building. The second person was my direct supervisor, Melissa Patterson. She was 27, had been with Henderson for 5 years, and from the moment I stepped into her department, I could feel her hostility like a physical force. I couldn't understand it. I had done nothing to earn her dislike. I greeted her every morning with a smile, completed every task she assigned, arrived early, and often worked through part of my lunch break when we were swamped. Melissa had this way of looking at me that made my skin crawl. Her eyes would narrow just slightly whenever I spoke in meetings, and her lips would press into a thin line whenever anyone complimented my work. She was attractive in a sharp, angular way. Blonde hair always pulled back so tightly it looked painful, designer glasses that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and a wardrobe that screamed, "I take myself very seriously." The incident that really showed me how deep her animosity ran happened about 3 months into my internship. It was almost lunchtime, and I was rushing to finish formatting a spreadsheet before the break. I made an error, a simple mistake in one of the data fields. It was the kind of thing that happens when you're learning a new system, the kind of thing that could be corrected in 30 seconds. Melissa noticed it immediately, but instead of pulling me aside quietly, she chose to make an example of me in front of the entire department. "Emily!" Her voice cut across the office like a whip. "Can you explain to everyone here what you were thinking when you entered this data?" I felt heat rush to my face as 20 pairs of eyes turned toward me. My throat went dry. I'm sorry, I must have misunderstood This is basic spreadsheet management, Emily. Basic. Did they not teach you this in school? Or were you just not paying attention during training? She held up a printout of my work, waving it like evidence at a trial. This kind of carelessness could have affected our quarterly projections. Do you understand the magnitude of what you've done? The magnitude. She made it sound like I'd crashed the company server. In reality, it was a single cell in a practice document that wouldn't affect anything operational. I could see some of my coworkers shifting uncomfortably in their seats. A few exchanged glances that clearly said they found her reaction excessive. I apologize, Melissa. I'll correct it right. You'll correct it after lunch. And I want a written explanation of why it happened on my desk by end of day. I nodded, grabbed my purse, and walked to the elevator with my vision blurring from tears I refused to let fall until I was alone. I spent my lunch break in my car, sobbing into a sandwich I couldn't bring myself to eat, wondering what I had done to make her hate me so much. When I returned to the office, one of my coworkers, a kind older woman named Susan, squeezed my shoulder as she passed my desk. Don't take it personally, honey. I've never seen her react that way to such a small mistake. There's something else going on there. But what? I kept my head down, worked harder, stayed later. I watched as the other trainee, a girl named Ashley who'd started 2 months after me, received easy assignments and warm smiles from Melissa. Ashley got the simple data entry tasks while I was buried under complex analytical projects that Melissa seemed to assign specifically because she knew I'd struggle with them. And when I couldn't complete everything, because the workload was genuinely unrealistic, I was certain Melissa filed reports with her supervisors documenting my supposed inadequacy. The months crawled by under this constant pressure. My trainee period was set to end in early December, and word had circulated that only one trainee would be offered a permanent position. With Melissa clearly favoring Ashley, my future at Henderson looked bleak. Then something unexpected happened that would change the trajectory of everything. In late November, Melissa announced she would be taking a month-long medical leave for a minor surgical procedure that required extended recovery time. Her absence would cover my final month as a trainee. I felt guilty for the wave of relief that washed over me, guilty but also desperately grateful for the reprieve from her constant criticism. On the morning of her procedure, our department gathered for a brief meeting. As everyone prepared to disperse, I stood up and raised my hand. Before we all get back to work, I said, my voice wavering slightly, I think we should say a prayer for Melissa, for her safety during the procedure and a smooth recovery. I saw a few surprised expressions. After all, Melissa hadn't exactly been beloved by the team, but slowly, people nodded. We formed a circle, joined hands, and I led a simple prayer asking for the surgery to go well, for skilled hands to guide the doctors, and for healing in the coming weeks. Despite everything Melissa had put me through, I genuinely didn't wish her harm. That wasn't who I was. That afternoon, we received word that the procedure had gone perfectly. Melissa would recover at home for the next 4 weeks. What happened in the following week felt like divine intervention, though I hesitate to call it that without sounding presumptuous. Maybe it was just fortunate timing. Maybe it was the universe's way of balancing the scales. Or maybe God really does have a plan for each of us, and this was mine unfolding. During my personal time at home, I had been teaching myself advanced spreadsheet programming, specifically, how to create automated systems for data analysis. It was something I did in the evenings after work and on weekends, watching tutorials and practicing with sample datasets. I discovered I had a knack for it, and more importantly, I could see how much time and error it could save the company. With Melissa gone and her temporary replacement, a easygoing manager named David from the Seattle office, overseeing our department, I finally had the space to implement what I'd been learning. We had been generating 3 separate reports daily for different departments, each requiring manual data entry and analysis. It was tedious, time-consuming, and prone to human error. I designed a program that would automatically pull data from our various systems, cross-reference it, check for anomalies, and generate all 3 reports simultaneously with minimal human intervention. What had taken 6 hours of work could now be done in 30 minutes. David was blown away. Emily, this is exactly the kind of innovation we need. Why didn't anyone think of this before? I knew the answer, because Melissa would have shut it down immediately, calling it unnecessary, or claiming I was wasting time on projects outside my job description. But I just smiled and said, sometimes fresh eyes see new solutions. The next day, I received an email from John's assistant asking me to come to his office. My stomach dropped. John Drake didn't typically meet with trainees unless something was seriously wrong or seriously right. I couldn't imagine which category I fell into. His office was on the top floor with windows that offered a panoramic view of the Willamette River and the bridges spanning it. The furniture was sleek and modern, all clean lines and dark wood. John sat behind his desk in a charcoal suit, his tie loosened just slightly, the only concession to the end of the workday. Emily, please sit. He gestured to the chair across from him, and I noticed his desk was clear except for a laptop and a single notepad with my name written at the top. "Thank you for coming up. I wanted to talk to you about the automated reporting system you implemented this week." He leaned back in his chair, studying me with those intense eyes. "It's impressive. Very impressive. Can you walk me through how you built it?" For the next 20 minutes, I explained my process, the coding logic, the data structures, the error-checking protocols. John listened intently, occasionally nodding or jotting down notes. When I finished, he set down his pen and leaned forward. "Where did you learn to do this? It's beyond what we typically expect from someone in your position. Online tutorials, mostly. I found some excellent resources from developers who specialize in business applications. A lot of them are in English, so it helped that I'm fluent." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "You're fluent in English? I mean, obviously your English is excellent, but I did 2 consecutive summer study abroad programs in Boston during high school," I explained. 3 months each year. It gave me a solid foundation. John switched to English without missing a beat, his accent flawless with just a hint of a northeastern edge. "What did you think of Boston?" We conversed for several minutes in English, him asking about my experience, me describing the brownstones and the Freedom Trail and summer evenings at Fenway Park. His English was as impeccable as his Portuguese, and I found myself relaxing into the conversation, almost forgetting this was my boss's boss interviewing me. Then he asked in English, "What are your career goals, Emily? Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" I took a breath and answered honestly, also in English. "I want to be in a position where I can use data to drive strategic decisions. I love finding patterns and efficiencies that others miss. Ideally, I'd be leading a team focused on business intelligence and analytics." "And does Henderson Home Furnishings factor into those plans?" The question hung in the air. I hesitated, weighing whether to be diplomatic or honest. We were past my trainee end date. What did I have to lose? "I'd love for it to," I said, switching back to Portuguese. "But I'm realistic about my situation. Despite my best efforts, I don't think Melissa sees me as someone worth keeping on the team. And from what I understand, only 1 trainee position is being converted to permanent." John's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. "Tell me about your work with Melissa." So I did. Not in a complaining way. I tried to keep it factual. I outlined the assignments I'd completed, the extra hours I'd put in, the initiatives I'd taken. I didn't go into detail about the humiliations or the obvious favoritism toward Ashley, but I think John read between the lines. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, tapping his pen against his notepad. Finally, he spoke. "You're not the first person to have concerns about Melissa's management style. I want you to know that." He paused. "Here's what I'm going to do. We were planning to convert 1 trainee position to permanent. I'm making it 2. You're being offered a full-time position as a data analyst, Emily, effective immediately." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Are you serious?" "Completely. Your work speaks for itself. Welcome to the team, permanently." I practically floated back to my desk, my heart pounding with a mixture of relief and joy and disbelief. When I got home that night, I called my mom and cried happy tears for the first time in months. 4 weeks later, Melissa returned from medical leave. I'll never forget her face when she walked into the office and saw me at my desk. Her steps faltered for just a moment, and her eyes narrowed. She looked around, searching for Ashley, then turned on her heel and headed straight for John's office without even taking off her coat. I couldn't hear what was said behind that closed door, but when Melissa emerged 15 minutes later, her face was flushed and her jaw was clenched so tightly I could see the muscles working. She didn't look at me as she stalked to her own office and closed the door with more force than necessary. The tension in the following weeks was suffocating. Melissa's persecution of me intensified to a degree I hadn't thought possible. Every tiny mistake, and I mean truly minor things, like a slightly misaligned column header or a report delivered at 4:58 instead of 4:30, was treated like a catastrophic failure. She would call me into her office and berate me, her voice dripping with contempt, while Ashley could make actual significant errors and receive nothing more than a gentle correction. I started going home frustrated almost every day. Some evenings, I'd sit in my car in the parking garage and cry before driving home, trying to compose myself so my boyfriend wouldn't see how upset I was. But I refused to give up. I prayed every night for Melissa, asking God to soften her heart, to help her find peace, to show me how to navigate this impossible situation. Then John called me into his office again, and this time, he presented me with a challenge that would either make or break my career at Henderson. "Emily, I have a project for you," he said, pulling up several spreadsheets on his monitor. "Our data management system is outdated and inefficient. We're currently outsourcing a significant portion of our business intelligence work to a third-party firm, which is costing us a fortune. I want you to build an internal system that can handle everything in-house: data collection, analysis, forecasting, reporting, all of it." The scope was massive. This wasn't a simple automation script. This was a full-scale data infrastructure overhaul. "If you can pull this off," John continued, "I'll create a new position for you, business intelligence analyst. You'd report directly to me, not to Melissa, but I need to know you can deliver. You have 3 weeks. 3 weeks. It felt impossible, but as I looked at his face, I saw something there. Faith in me, maybe. Or hope. He was giving me an escape route from Melissa's tyranny, but I had to earn it. "I'll do it," I heard myself say. The next 3 weeks were the most intense period of my life. Melissa, sensing that I was working on something important, seemed determined to sabotage my progress. She would assign me meaningless tasks right in the middle of my workday, busy work that served no purpose except to distract me and eat up my time. "Emily, I need you to reorganize the filing system in the storage room. Emily, can you create a presentation on office supply vendors for a meeting that may or may not happen next month?" I would complete whatever she demanded, then stay late at the office or take work home. My boyfriend Ryan, a project manager at a construction firm, would find me at midnight hunched over my laptop, surrounded by scribbled notes and cold cups of coffee. Weekends disappeared into a blur of coding, testing, debugging. I created mock datasets to test my systems, broke them, rebuilt them, refined them. On the morning of the deadline, I had something that worked. It wasn't perfect. Software never is. But it was functional, elegant, and it would save the company hundreds of thousands of dollars annually while providing better, faster insights than the outsourced service ever had. I knocked on John's door with my heart in my throat. "Come in." He was reviewing quarterly reports, but he set them aside immediately when he saw my face. "Is it ready?" "It's ready. Can I show you?" For the next hour, I walked him through the entire system. I demonstrated how it pulled real-time data from our inventory management, customer relations, and financial systems. I showed him the predictive analytics that could forecast demand trends. I revealed the customizable dashboard that could give any executive exactly the information they needed at a glance. When I finished, John was quiet. Then a slow smile spread across his face. "Implement it. Today. I want this running by tomorrow morning." "Really? Really? This is exceptional work, Emily. Truly exceptional." I worked with the IT department through the afternoon and evening, integrating my system with the company's existing infrastructure. By the time I left the office at 11 that night, everything was live and running. The next morning, the difference was immediately apparent. Reports that used to take hours to compile were ready before people even sat down at their desks. The data was cleaner, more accurate, more actionable. John called an all-hands meeting that afternoon. The entire department gathered in the large conference room, and I felt Melissa's eyes boring into me from across the room. "I want to recognize someone for exceptional work," John began. "Emily Rivera has single-handedly built a data management system that will transform how we operate. Effective immediately, she's being promoted to business intelligence analyst. She'll be taking on expanded responsibilities and reporting directly to senior leadership." The room erupted in applause. I saw genuine happiness on most faces, people who had watched Melissa bully me and were glad to see me succeed. But Melissa's expression was stone, her lips pressed together in a thin line, her eyes radiating pure fury. The year-end company celebration arrived in mid-December. Henderson had promised that if we hit our annual targets, they'd treat everyone to a full day at Skamania Lodge, a beautiful resort in the Columbia River Gorge. We'd exceeded our goals by 18%, so the party was on. I brought Ryan, my boyfriend of 3 years. He worked long hours in construction project management, but he'd taken the day off to join me. Melissa brought her husband, Marcus, a real estate attorney who seemed pleasant enough in the brief interaction we had. Other colleagues brought their partners, and the lodge's main hall filled with laughter and conversation. I noticed John was alone again. No date, no +1. He moved through the crowd with easy confidence, shaking hands and making small talk, but always by himself. It struck me as odd that someone like him, successful, attractive, personable, seemed to have no romantic life whatsoever. Before the festivities began in earnest, John gathered everyone in the main conference room for announcements. He presented the year's numbers, the growth we'd achieved, the new markets we'd entered, the revenue milestones we'd surpassed. Then he did something unexpected. Every year, we recognize one employee who exemplifies the innovation and dedication that drives this company forward. This year, that recognition goes to someone who joined us as a trainee and, through exceptional work and initiative, has fundamentally changed how we operate. He looked directly at me. Emily Rivera, could you come up here? My legs felt like jelly as I made my way to the front of the room. The applause was thunderous, except, I noticed, from one corner where Melissa sat with her arms crossed, her face a mask of barely contained rage. The rest of the day was magical. We hiked forest trails, soaked in the heated pools, enjoyed an incredible dinner with views of the gorge. Ryan and I held hands as we watched the sunset paint the cliffs in shades of orange and pink, and for the first time in months, I felt truly at peace. But something was shifting in my relationship that I couldn't quite name yet. A distance that had been growing so gradually I'd almost missed it. Ryan had been distracted lately, less present even when we were together. Our intimate moments had become rare. He was constantly on his phone, guarding it with a protectiveness that seemed excessive, and he'd been coming home late, a lot. Working late on the downtown renovation project, he'd say, but something about his explanations felt off. He couldn't meet my eyes when he talked about it. The details were vague and inconsistent. Women have intuition for a reason. Mine was screaming that something was wrong. A few days after the company celebration, I started researching. I know it sounds invasive, but I had to know. I found an app that, once installed on a phone, would allow me to monitor messages and locations. One evening while Ryan was in the shower, I quickly installed it on his phone and then slipped the device back where he'd left it. What I discovered over the next few days made me wish I'd never looked. But knowledge, however painful, is better than ignorance. Ryan was having an affair. The messages were explicit, affectionate, planning secret meetups. And the woman he was seeing? My stomach had dropped to somewhere around my feet when I saw her name. Melissa Patterson, my supervisor. The woman who had made my work life a nightmare for months. Now she was sleeping with my boyfriend. The messages revealed everything. They'd met at the resort celebration. Apparently, Melissa had approached Ryan when I was in the restroom, introduced herself as my supervisor, made some flirty comment. They'd exchanged numbers. Within days, they were meeting up. The betrayal was methodical, calculated. One message from Melissa particularly stuck with me. Does she have any idea? Poor thing probably thinks you're just working late. This is almost too easy. And Ryan's response, she's clueless, too busy with her precious job to notice anything anyway. I read that message 3 times, each time feeling like someone was driving a knife deeper into my chest. Too busy with my precious job? The job I'd been working myself to exhaustion at, partly because I was trying to save money for our future together? The job that Melissa had made unbearable? The next morning, I left for work early. I sat in my car in the parking garage and sobbed until my throat was raw and my eyes were so swollen, I had to wait 20 minutes before I could go inside without everyone immediately knowing something was wrong. When I finally made it to my desk, I couldn't focus. My mind kept cycling through the messages, the lies, the elaborate deception. I was going to lose my relationship and my job because I couldn't work in the same company as Melissa anymore. I couldn't face her every day knowing what she'd done. Around mid-morning, John's assistant appeared at my desk. John needs to see you in his office. It's urgent. I followed her upstairs, my thoughts scattered, my heart heavy. When I entered his office, his expression was grim. Close the door and sit down, please. I did, my hands trembling slightly. Emily, we have a serious problem. There was a major error in the inventory forecasting system, your system. It triggered an automatic order for 30,000 units of the Ashland dining set. That's 3 times what we'd normally order for an entire quarter. The financial impact is significant, and it's going to tie up warehouse space we desperately need for holiday inventory. The words washed over me, but they felt distant, like someone was speaking to me through water. An error in my system? That was impossible. I'd tested every algorithm, every failsafe, but my brain was so overwhelmed with the Ryan-Melissa situation that I couldn't think straight. I don't understand how that could have happened, I managed to say, hearing the weakness in my own voice. I'll review everything, find where. I need more than that, Emily. This is going to cost us nearly $500,000 to rectify. I need to know how this happened, and I need to know today. I nodded, tears already forming. I'm so sorry. I'll figure it out. I left his office and barely made it to the bathroom before the tears came. I locked myself in a stall and let it all out. The betrayal, the humiliation, the professional failure, everything. When I finally emerged, I splashed cold water on my face and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked terrible. Devastated. Lost. But I had work to do. I returned to my desk and tried to dive into the code, searching for the error that had caused such a massive problem. Nothing made sense. Every line of logic checked out. Every validation protocol had functioned correctly. My mind was too fractured to concentrate. At lunch, I grabbed takeout and found myself driving aimlessly, ending up at St. Michael's, a small church I'd passed hundreds of times but never entered. On impulse, I pulled into the parking lot. The church was empty and dim, lit only by afternoon sun filtering through stained glass windows. I walked down the center aisle and knelt before the altar, staring up at the cross. Please, I whispered. I need help. I need guidance. I can't do this alone anymore. And in that silence, something shifted. A memory surfaced. Something I'd completely forgotten in my emotional turmoil. The monitoring program. The security software I'd installed on my work computer weeks ago, back when I'd had a strange feeling during prayer that I needed to protect myself from sabotage. The program that logged every keystroke, every action, every login on my machine. I hadn't thought about it in weeks, but it had been running this entire time, recording everything. I jumped to my feet and practically ran back to my car. Within minutes, I was back at the office, waiting impatiently for John to return from lunch. The moment I saw him step off the elevator, I intercepted him. John, I need to show you something. Can you spare 20 minutes after work? It's about the inventory error. He studied my face. Are you all right? You look... I'm fine. I just need you to see something. Please. All right. Come to my office at 5:30 when everyone else has left. The rest of the afternoon crawled by. At 5:25, I watched the last of my coworkers file out. At 5:30, I knocked on John's door. Come in. I entered with my laptop and pulled up the monitoring software. I installed this program several weeks ago. It logs everything that happens on my computer, every file opened, every line of code written, every login. It runs in the background constantly. John's eyes widened slightly. Why would you install something like that? Insurance, I said simply. I had a feeling I might need it one day, and I was right. I navigated to 3 days prior, the timestamp when the inventory order would have been modified. We watched the log together. At 7:47 p.m., over an hour after I'd left for the day, someone had logged into my computer using my credentials. For the next 18 minutes, we could see exactly what they'd done. Accessed my system, found the inventory forecasting module, changed the multiplier variable from 1.0 to 3.0, saved the file, and logged out. Can you pull up the security camera footage from that evening? I asked. John's jaw was clenched as he opened the security system on his computer and navigated to the correct date and time. We watched the footage together. At 7:45 p.m., the office was empty except for one person, Melissa Patterson. She approached my desk, looked around to ensure she was alone, sat down at my computer, and proceeded to type for nearly 20 minutes. The timestamp on the video matched the monitoring software log perfectly. I don't know what expression was on my face, but John looked at me with concern. Emily? And that's when everything came pouring out. I told him about Melissa's persecution from day one. Every humiliation, every impossible assignment, every instance of favoritism toward Ashley. I told him about the emotional toll it had taken, the crying in my car, the prayers for strength to endure another day. And then, because I was already so emotionally raw, I told him about Ryan, about noticing the changes in his behavior, the distance, the late nights, about installing the monitoring app on his phone, about discovering the affair with Melissa. I showed him screenshots of their messages, including the ones where they mocked me, where Melissa gloated about destroying my career while stealing my boyfriend. She didn't just want to sabotage my work, I heard myself say, my voice shaking. She wanted to destroy my entire life. By the time I finished, I was crying again. John sat quietly for a long moment, then stood and walked around his desk. He pulled me to my feet and wrapped his arms around me in a firm, brotherly embrace. He smelled like cedar and something citrusy. His suit jacket was soft against my cheek, For just a moment, I let myself lean into that comfort, feeling protected for the first time in months. "Take tomorrow off," he said quietly. "I'm going to handle this. Melissa will not be returning to this company." I nodded against his chest, then stepped back and wiped my eyes. "Thank you for believing me. I've had doubts about her management style for a long time. But this?" He gestured to the computer screens showing the evidence. "This is beyond redemption. She's done." I went home that evening feeling strange, still hurt, still angry, but also lighter somehow. When I walked into the apartment, Ryan was already there, claiming he'd gotten off early for once. "Hey babe," he said, barely looking up from his phone. "How was work?" I stood in the doorway and looked at him. Really looked at him. This man I'd spent 3 years with, planned a future with, trusted completely. And he'd thrown it all away for what? Some excitement? The thrill of deception? "Ryan, we need to talk." Something in my tone made him set down his phone. "What's wrong?" I pulled out my own phone and opened the screenshots I'd saved. I laid them out on the coffee table one by one. Messages between him and Melissa, plans for their meetings, intimate details I wish I'd never read. The color drained from his face. "Emily, I can—" "Don't." My voice was steady, cold. "Don't insult me by trying to explain this away. I want you to pack a bag and leave. Tonight. You can come back this weekend when I'm out to get the rest of your things." He fell to his knees, actually fell to his knees like something out of a bad movie. "Please, Em, please. It was a mistake. It meant nothing. I love you. Give me another chance." Betrayal is a choice, Ryan, not a mistake. You chose this. Every day, every lie, every time you came home late and looked me in the eye and lied about where you'd been. Those were choices. But get out. Now. Or I'm calling the police and telling them you're refusing to leave my apartment. It took another hour of arguing, of him pleading, of me remaining firm. Finally, he packed a duffel bag and left. The moment the door closed behind him, I collapsed onto the couch and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for weeks. I was alone, single for the first time in 3 years. But I wasn't broken. Wounded, yes. Betrayed, absolutely. But not broken. That night, I prayed for a long time. I thanked God for revealing the truth, for giving me the wisdom to install those monitoring programs, for protecting me from a life built on lies. I prayed for healing. I prayed for strength. And somewhere in those prayers, I felt a peace settle over me. The storm was passing. Clear skies were ahead. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window and the strange sensation of not having to rush anywhere. John had given me the day off, and the apartment was silent. No Ryan moving around, no tension hanging in the air. Just quiet. I stayed in bed longer than I had in months, staring at the ceiling and processing everything that had happened in the past 48 hours. My relationship had ended. My worst enemy at work had been exposed. My career, which had seemed on the verge of collapse, was somehow intact. It felt like I'd been caught in a tornado and had finally landed, bruised but standing. Around noon, I made myself lunch. A simple grilled cheese sandwich that I ate while watching mindless television. I let myself cry a few more times, mourning not what Ryan and I had become, but what I'd thought we were. The future I'd imagined was gone, replaced by uncertainty. And uncertainty, I was discovering, could be either terrifying or liberating depending on how you looked at it. Late afternoon, I felt a pull toward St. Michael's again. I drove there in comfortable clothes, jeans and a sweater, and found the church unlocked and empty, just as it had been the day before. I walked to the front pew and knelt before the crucifix, my hands clasped loosely in my lap. "Thank you," I whispered, "for seeing me through this, for giving me strength when I didn't think I had any left, for protecting me from people who meant me harm." I prayed for a long time, and as the sun began to set, painting the stained glass windows in brilliant colors, I felt something shift inside me. The heaviness that had been pressing on my chest for months began to lift. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was ready to actually live again. When I arrived at work the next morning, the first thing I noticed was Melissa's empty office. Her desk had been cleared, her nameplate removed from the door. It was as if she'd never existed. John's assistant was waiting at my desk when I arrived. "John would like to see you as soon as you're settled." I dropped my bag at my workstation and headed upstairs. When I entered John's office, he was standing by the window, hands in his pockets, looking out over the city. He turned when he heard me. Emily, how are you feeling? Better, I said honestly. Still processing everything, but better. He gestured for me to sit. I want to update you on what happened yesterday. I called Melissa in first thing in the morning and showed her the security footage and the computer logs. She didn't take it well. That was an understatement, I imagined. What did she say? She denied it at first. Then she tried to justify it, claimed you'd been gunning for her position, that you'd manipulated me, that she was just protecting herself. When none of that worked, she threatened legal action, talked about wrongful termination, hostile work environment, the whole playbook. He shook his head. None of it holds water. We have clear evidence of deliberate sabotage. Her employment was terminated effective immediately. I absorbed this, feeling a mixture of vindication and something else. Was it pity? No, not quite. Maybe just sadness that someone would destroy their own career out of jealousy and spite. There's something else, John continued. I need a new department supervisor. Someone who understands the work, has already proven themselves capable of innovation and leadership. I'd like to offer you the position. My eyes widened. Melissa's position. Yes, I know it's a big jump, and I know you haven't had formal management experience, but I've watched how you work, how you interact with colleagues, how you handle pressure. You have what it takes. What do you say? I took a breath. It was a huge challenge, supervising people who'd been my peers days ago, managing workflows and personnel issues I'd never dealt with before. But hadn't I just proven I could rise to challenges? Hadn't I just survived the worst few months of my professional life and come out stronger? I'll do it, I said. Thank you for believing in me. John called an all-hands meeting that afternoon. The department gathered in the conference room, curious and confused about the sudden changes. When everyone was seated, John stood at the front of the room with me beside him. I know there have been questions about recent personnel changes, he began. I want to address those directly. Melissa Patterson is no longer with Henderson Home Furnishings. She engaged in serious misconduct that violated company policy and ethical standards. I can't share specific details, but I can tell you that this decision was made based on clear evidence and was necessary to protect the integrity of our team. I saw eyes darting around the room, people exchanging glances. They were clearly hungry for details, but John's tone made it clear none would be forthcoming. Effective immediately, Emily Rivera will be taking over as department supervisor. I know some of you may have questions about this rapid promotion, but I want to be very clear. Emily has earned this position through exceptional work, innovative thinking, and unwavering dedication to this company. She has my full confidence and support. There was polite applause, though I could see uncertainty on some faces. Leading former peers is never easy, and I knew I'd have to prove myself all over again. The first few weeks were challenging in ways I hadn't anticipated. Some colleagues accepted my new authority easily. Susan, the kind older woman who'd comforted me months ago, was thrilled. Finally, someone decent in charge, she told me privately. But others were more skeptical. There were whispers about favoritism, suggestions that my relationship with John had influenced the decision, pointed questions about my qualifications. I handled it the only way I knew how, by being fair, transparent, and competent. I motivated people when they needed encouragement and held them accountable when they fell short. I never asked anyone to do something I wouldn't do myself. When someone excelled, I praised them publicly. When someone struggled, I coached them privately. I implemented process improvements that made everyone's jobs easier, streamlined reporting requirements, and fought for better resources for my team. And slowly, the skepticism faded. Within 3 months, our department's productivity was up 23%. Employee satisfaction surveys showed the highest scores in company history. Even the skeptics had to admit things were working. The company itself was thriving. My data systems were providing insights that drove strategic decisions. We expanded our product lines, entered new markets, began preliminary discussions about international expansion. John and I worked closely together, sometimes staying late to review projections or strategize about upcoming initiatives. 6 months after Ryan left my life, I realized I hadn't thought about him in weeks. The wound had healed, leaving barely a scar. I'd thrown myself into work, into building a life I was proud of, into becoming the person I wanted to be rather than half of a couple. I'd gone on exactly 1 date during that time, a setup by a well-meaning friend, and it had been pleasant, but forgettable. I wasn't looking for a relationship. I was content being alone. but I couldn't help noticing certain things about John. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled genuinely, not just professionally. The way he rolled up his sleeves when he was deep into problem solving, revealing forearms that I definitely shouldn't be noticing. The way his voice dropped half an octave when he was tired, taking on a gravelly quality that did strange things to my pulse. The way his hair sometimes fell across his forehead when he'd been running his hands through it in frustration, and how he'd push it back with an unconscious gesture that was somehow endearing. I noticed his perfectly tailored suits, charcoal and navy mostly, crisp white shirts, silk ties and subtle patterns. I noticed how he smelled like cedar and bergamot, a scent I'd started associating with safety and competence. I noticed his hands, strong, capable, with long fingers that moved with precision whether he was typing or gesturing during a presentation. And I noticed that he was noticing me. It started small. Him asking if I wanted coffee when he went to get some. Finding reasons to stop by my office to discuss things that could have been handled over email. The way his gaze would linger half a second longer than strictly professional when I spoke in meetings. The way he'd laugh at my jokes, even the ones that weren't particularly funny. But we both maintained strict boundaries. He was my boss. I was his direct report. Neither of us would cross that line, no matter what we might be feeling. Then came the Monday morning that changed everything. It was early September, just after Labor Day. I'd arrived at work at my usual time, 7:30, and parked in my assigned spot in the underground garage. As I gathered my laptop bag and travel mug, I noticed John's car pulling in 3 spaces away. We'd never arrived at exactly the same time before. We met at the elevator, both smiling at the coincidence. "Great minds," he said, pressing the call button. "Or just predictable routines," I replied. We stepped into the elevator together. The doors slid shut. John pressed the button for the 30th floor, the executive level where both our offices now were. The elevator began its ascent. We'd reached the 8th floor when everything went dark. The elevator jolted to a stop and the lights went out completely. Emergency lighting should have kicked in immediately, but nothing happened. We were suspended in absolute blackness. My heart began pounding immediately. I've had a fear of the dark for as long as I can remember. Something about the complete absence of visual input that makes me feel unmoored, untethered from reality. As a child, I'd had terrible nightmares about being trapped in darkness. Even as an adult, I slept with a lamp on, a warm glow that kept the shadows at bay. "Emily? You okay?" John's voice came from somewhere to my right. My breath was coming faster, shallower. I could feel panic rising in my chest like a physical thing pressing against my lungs. "I don't like the dark. I really don't like the dark. Where are you? Talk to me so I can find you." "I'm here. I reached out blindly, and my hand connected with fabric, his suit jacket. "John?" His hand closed around mine, warm and solid. "I've got you. I'm right here." "I can't see anything. I can't." My breathing was becoming ragged. I knew logically that we were safe, that the elevator had emergency protocols, that the power would come back on soon. But logic doesn't matter when your hindbrain is screaming danger. John's other hand found my shoulder, and then he was guiding me closer until I was pressed against him. His arms wrapped around me, one hand cradling the back of my head, the other firm against my back. "You're safe," he said quietly, his voice steady and calm. "The building has backup generators. They'll kick in any second. The elevator will start moving again. We're completely safe." I pressed my face against his chest, focusing on the solid reality of him, the warmth of his body, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against my cheek, the rise and fall of his breathing. My hands gripped his shirt, anchoring myself to something real in the darkness. "That's it," he murmured. "Just breathe. In and out. You're doing great." His cologne enveloped me, that cedar and bergamot scent that had become so familiar. I could feel the texture of his suit jacket under my fingers, the strength in his arms as he held me. And slowly, my panic began to recede. My breathing steadied. My racing heart calmed. We stood like that for what felt like a long time, but was probably only a minute or two. And even after my fear had passed, neither of us moved. There was something about the darkness, the enforced intimacy, that made it feel like we existed outside normal reality, outside the rules and boundaries we'd so carefully maintained. "Thank you," I whispered against his chest. "Anytime." His hand moved gently against my back, and I felt him rest his chin on top of my head. For what it's worth, This is the most pleasant elevator malfunction I've ever experienced. I laughed despite myself, a soft sound that seemed loud in the enclosed space. You have a lot of elevator malfunctions? Not nearly enough of the right kind, apparently. There was something in his tone, a warmth, an openness, that made my breath catch for an entirely different reason than panic. Was he saying what I thought he was saying? Before I could respond, the lights flickered back on. The elevator hummed to life and continued its ascent as if nothing had happened. But everything had happened. Everything had changed. John and I stepped apart slowly, blinking in the sudden brightness. Our eyes met, and I saw my own feelings reflected there. Awareness, attraction, something deeper that neither of us was quite ready to name. That was... I started. Yeah, he agreed, understanding without me needing to finish. The elevator doors opened on the 30th floor. We stepped out together, and John paused in the hallway. Emily, would you... He stopped, shook his head. Never mind. We should probably get to work. John. I touched his arm, feeling bold in a way I rarely did. What were you going to say? He looked down at where my hand rested on his sleeve, then back up at my face. Would you stay late tonight? After everyone else leaves? I think we need to talk. My heart did a complicated flip. Yes, I'd like that. We parted ways to our respective offices, but I couldn't focus on work. My mind kept replaying those moments in the darkness, the feeling of being held, the intimacy of it, the way my fear had dissolved in his arms, and the way neither of us had wanted to let go once the fear was gone. The day dragged interminably. I attended meetings, responded to emails, reviewed reports, but my attention was fractured. Every time I saw John in the hallway or past his office, our eyes would meet for just a moment, holding a silent conversation we couldn't have aloud. At 5 o'clock, people began leaving. By 5:30, the floor was nearly empty. At 5:45, my phone chimed with a text from John. Coffee in my office? I grabbed my favorite mug and walked down the hall, my heart beating faster with each step. His door was open and he looked up when I appeared in the doorway. Come in, close the door. I did, and he gestured to the small coffee station in the corner of his office, an expensive machine that made everything from espresso to cappuccinos. What would you like? Surprise me. He smiled and worked the machine with practiced ease, producing 2 perfect cappuccinos with foam art on top. We sat in the chairs by his window rather than across his desk, a more casual arrangement, less boss and employee. For a moment, we just sipped our coffee in silence, watching the city below as office lights began flickering on in other buildings. This morning, John finally said, in the elevator, that wasn't just about helping you through a panic attack. No, I agreed quietly. It wasn't. I need to be honest with you about something. He set down his cup and turned to face me fully. I've had feelings for you for a while now. Months, if I'm being truthful. Since before all the business with Melissa and Ryan, if I'm being completely honest. My breath caught. John, let me finish. He held up a hand. I know this is complicated. I'm your boss. There are power dynamics and professional boundaries, and a dozen good reasons why we shouldn't pursue this. But I also think life is too short to ignore something real when you find it. And this, he gestured between us, this feels real to me. I set down my own cup, my hands trembling slightly. It feels real to me too, but you're right about the complications. People already whisper about favoritism. If we became something more, those whispers would turn into accusations. They would, he acknowledged. At first. But your work speaks for itself, Emily. The department numbers, the innovations, the team satisfaction scores, none of that has anything to do with personal feelings. You've earned every bit of your success. I know that. You know that. But will everyone else? He was quiet for a moment, considering. What if we were completely transparent about it? What if we told the team directly, laid out the timeline, made it clear that your promotion had nothing to do with any personal relationship, because there wasn't one at the time? Would that be enough? I don't know, he admitted. Maybe not for everyone. There are always going to be people who believe what they want to believe. But we can't live our lives worried about gossip from people who don't have all the facts. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. John came to stand beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him. I spent 3 years with someone who betrayed me, I said softly, who lied to me every day while pretending everything was fine. It made me question my judgment. my ability to see people clearly. What if I'm wrong again? What if... Emily. John's hand covered mine where it rested on the windowsill. I can't promise that choosing me will be easy. There will be challenges, professional complications, people's opinions, the difficulty of maintaining boundaries at work while being together outside of it. But I can promise you this: I will never lie to you. I will never betray you, and I will never take your trust for granted. I turned to look at him, searching his face. Those amber brown eyes held nothing but sincerity and vulnerability. This was John without his professional armor, without his executive polish. This was just a man taking a risk on something he believed in. Ask me to stay after work tomorrow, I heard myself say, and the day after that. Let's take this slow. Let's be sure before we tell anyone or change anything officially. A slow smile spread across his face. I can do slow. Though after this morning, I'm not sure how I'm going to manage keeping my hands to myself in elevators. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. Maybe we should take the stairs. Terrible for efficiency, but excellent for cardio. We stood there by the window as the sun set, hands intertwined, talking about everything and nothing. We talked for hours, about our childhoods, our dreams, our fears, our favorite books and movies and foods. We discovered we both loved hiking but hated camping, that we both preferred coffee to tea but only if it was made properly, that we both secretly enjoyed terrible reality TV shows. It was after 9 when I finally left his office, and the night janitor gave us a knowing look as I passed him in the hallway. Let him think what he wanted. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. The week that followed was sweet torture. John found excuses to ask me to stay late every day, and we'd spend 2 or 3 hours just being together, sometimes talking, sometimes working side by side in comfortable silence, sometimes just looking at each other with expressions that said everything words couldn't. On Friday afternoon, a massive thunderstorm rolled in. Rain lashed against the windows and thunder shook the building. John dismissed everyone at their normal time. No reason to make people drive in dangerous conditions. But he and I stayed, ostensibly to finish quarterly projections. Around 6 o'clock, I heard him on the phone. Yes, I'm still at the office. No, I'm not driving home in this. I'll wait it out. You do the same. No, seriously, don't risk it. Okay, stay safe. He appeared in my doorway a moment later. That was facility management. They're recommending everyone who's still here just stay put until this passes. Could be a couple of hours. I was planning on it. My car isn't great in heavy rain. Come to my office. I have a better view of the storm. We settled in his office with fresh coffee, watching the light show outside. Lightning forked across the sky, illuminating the city in brilliant flashes. Thunder rolled continuously, a deep bass note that I could feel in my chest. I love thunderstorms, John said. Always have. There's something primal about them, nature reminding us how small we really are. I used to be terrified of them as a kid, I admitted. The darkness, the noise, the feeling that the world was ending. But my dad would sit with me during storms and teach me to count the seconds between lightning and thunder to figure out how far away it was. He made it into a game, turned something scary into something scientific and manageable. Smart man. He was. He is. I smiled, thinking of my father, a high school physics teacher who'd always encouraged my curiosity. He's the one who taught me that understanding something takes away its power to frighten you. John was quiet for a moment, then said, "Is that what you're doing with me? Trying to understand me so I don't frighten you?" I turned to look at him. "You don't frighten me, John. This," I gestured between us, "this is terrifying. But you make me feel safe." He set down his coffee cup and stood, extending his hand to me. I took it, and he pulled me gently to my feet. We stood facing each other, the storm raging outside, the office lit only by the occasional flash of lightning and the dim glow of the city beyond. "Emily," he said softly, "I'm going to kiss you now. If you don't want me to, say so." Instead of answering, I reached up and pulled his face down to mine. The kiss was everything the one in the elevator had been, and more. It was gentle at first, tentative, both of us hyper-aware of the line we were crossing. Then his hand slid into my hair, and mine gripped his shirt, and gentle became urgent. We kissed like people who'd been holding back for too long, like we were making up for months of professional distance and careful boundaries. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, John rested his forehead against mine. "So much for slow," he murmured. I laughed breathlessly. I think we've been going slow for months without realizing it. Maybe it's time to speed up. We kissed again and again until the storm outside had passed and the city lights had settled into their steady nighttime glow. When we finally left the office together, John walked me to my car and kissed me one more time before I drove away. That weekend, we planned carefully. We decided to spend 3 days together, Friday through Monday, with Monday being a holiday, without talking about work at all. We'd use the time to really get to know each other outside the office, to see if what we felt in stolen moments after work could translate into something real and lasting. Saturday was John's choice. He surprised me by taking me on a helicopter tour, something I'd mentioned once, months ago, that I'd always wanted to try but never had. We lifted off from a small airfield outside Portland and soared over the city, following the Columbia River Gorge, flying over forests and waterfalls and the snow-capped peak of Mount Hood in the distance. "This is incredible," I shouted over the noise of the rotors, my face pressed against the window like a kid. John was grinning at my reaction, clearly pleased with himself. Worth the wait? Worth everything. Sunday was my turn to choose. I took him to a ranch about an hour outside the city, a place I'd been going since I was a child, where you could ride horses through mountain trails, fish in a stocked pond, and watch the sunset from the highest ridge with views that went on forever. We rode for hours, John surprisingly competent on horseback for someone who'd grown up in the city. We ate a picnic lunch by a stream. We caught exactly 0 fish but laughed ourselves silly trying. And as the sun began to set, we climbed to the ridge viewpoint and sat together on a weathered bench, his arm around my shoulders, my head on his chest. "I could get used to this," John said quietly. "Being terrible at fishing? Being with you." I tilted my head up to look at him. "Yeah, me too." Monday was our joint decision, a quiet day at his house. John insisted on cooking dinner, and I have to say, I was impressed. He moved around the kitchen with the same confidence and precision he brought to business decisions, producing a meal that looked like it belonged in a restaurant. He'd set the dining table beautifully, white tablecloth, red accents, golden candlesticks with cream-colored candles, a bottle of wine breathing in the center. He pulled out my chair for me like we were in a 5-star establishment, and I felt like a princess in a fairy tale. Dinner was incredible. Perfectly prepared pasta with pesto, asparagus that was somehow both tender and crispy, and for dessert, a coconut pudding with prunes and caramel sauce that tasted like heaven. After we ate, we moved to his couch, and suddenly the emotion of everything, the whole strange, difficult, wonderful journey that had led us here, crashed over me. I started crying and I couldn't stop. "Emily, what's wrong?" John pulled me close, concern written all over his face. "Nothing's wrong," I managed to say through tears. "Everything is right. That's the problem. This is all so perfect, and I keep waiting for it to fall apart. I keep thinking I don't deserve this, don't deserve you, don't deserve to be this happy after everything that happened." John took my face in both hands and looked directly into my eyes. "Listen to me. You deserve every good thing that comes your way. You've worked hard, you've maintained your integrity even when it would have been easier not to, you've been kind even to people who hurt you. If anyone deserves happiness, Emily, it's you. But what if people think? People will think what they think. We can't control that. But we can control how we handle it. Tomorrow when we go back to work, let's tell them. Let's be completely honest about the timeline, about how this happened, about how we've maintained professional boundaries until now." I nodded, wiping my eyes. "You're right. We haven't done anything wrong. We haven't, and we're not going to." That night, lying in John's arms as we watched some mindless movie on TV, I felt more at peace than I had in years. This was real. This was right. And whatever challenges came next, we'd face them together. Tuesday morning arrived too quickly. John and I had agreed to drive separately to work. No sense in fueling gossip before we'd had a chance to address things properly. But we texted back and forth during the commute like teenagers, making each other laugh with silly observations about traffic and terrible radio DJs. When I arrived at the office, the familiar anxiety started creeping in. By the time I'd settled at my desk and pulled up my email, my stomach was in knots. We were about to change everything, and there was no going back once we did. At 9 o'clock, John's assistant sent out a company-wide email requesting everyone's presence in the main conference room at 10. No agenda, no explanation. Just a mandatory all-hands meeting that would undoubtedly set the rumor mill spinning. I spent the intervening hour trying to focus on work and failing completely. Susan stopped by my office around 9:30 with coffee. She'd become something of a friend over the past months, and gave me a knowing look. "You okay, honey? You seem nervous." "Big meeting," I said, which wasn't exactly a lie. "Mm-hmm." She didn't look convinced, but didn't press. "Well, whatever it is, I'm sure you'll handle it beautifully. You always do." At 9:55, I made my way to the conference room. It was already packed, people standing along the walls when the seats filled up. The energy was curious, slightly anxious. Mandatory meetings usually meant either very good news or very bad news, and no one could tell which this would be. John entered at exactly 10 o'clock, and the room quieted immediately. I was sitting in the third row, trying to look professional and composed despite my racing heart. Our eyes met briefly, and he gave me the smallest nod before addressing the room. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. I know mandatory meetings can be unsettling, so let me start by saying this is good news. Or at least I hope you'll see it that way. I've called you here today because I believe in transparency, especially when it comes to matters that affect team dynamics and company culture." He paused, and I could feel the collective held breath of 50 people waiting for him to continue. "Over the past several months, many of you have witnessed significant changes in our department structure and leadership. Some of those changes were difficult, particularly the departure of Melissa Patterson. I want to address that situation head-on because I know there's been speculation." John pulled up a slide on the conference room screen, a timeline with dates and bullet points. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure people could hear it. 8 months ago, Emily Rivera joined us as a trainee. Within 3 months, her performance and initiative, specifically the automated reporting system she developed on her own time, demonstrated exceptional capability and value to this organization. Based purely on merit, I offered her a permanent position. The timeline on the screen showed these events with dates, making the sequence crystal clear. 6 months ago, Emily completed a major overhaul of our data infrastructure that has since saved this company hundreds of thousands of dollars and positioned us for expansion into new markets. Again, based solely on performance, she was promoted to Business Intelligence Analyst. More dates appeared on the timeline, each one documented and verified. 4 months ago, we discovered that Melissa Patterson had deliberately sabotaged company systems in an attempt to frame Emily for errors she did not commit. We have security footage and computer logs documenting this sabotage. Melissa's employment was terminated immediately, and Emily was offered the supervisory position based, once again, entirely on her qualifications and track record. John let this sink in. I could see people processing, connecting dots, understanding the full picture perhaps for the first time. I'm sharing these details because I want there to be absolutely no confusion about the timeline of Emily's career progression. Every promotion, every recognition, every opportunity has been earned through exceptional work. The data doesn't lie. Our department metrics have improved dramatically under her leadership. He advanced to the next slide, showing graphs of productivity increases, cost savings, and employee satisfaction scores. The numbers were undeniable. Now, here's the personal part, and the reason I wanted to have this conversation with all of you. John's voice softened slightly. Emily and I have developed romantic feelings for each other. This is recent, within the past 2 weeks. We've chosen to pursue a relationship, and we wanted you to hear it from us directly rather than through gossip. The room erupted in murmurs. I felt my face flush but kept my expression neutral, professional. "I want to be very clear about something," John continued, his voice cutting through the noise. "Our personal relationship began after all of Emily's promotions. It had zero influence on any professional decisions. And going forward, we will maintain strict boundaries to ensure there's never any appearance of favoritism or impropriety." He looked directly at me then, and I saw nothing but respect and admiration in his eyes. Emily is one of the most talented people I've had the privilege of working with. She's transformed how we operate, inspired her team to achieve record results, and conducted herself with integrity even when facing unfair treatment. She's earned everything she has. Our relationship doesn't change that. It just means I'm lucky enough to know her both professionally and personally. The murmurs had quieted. People were exchanging glances, processing this information. Then Susan started clapping. It started as a slow, deliberate applause, but within seconds, others joined in. Not everyone. I saw a few skeptical faces, a few people whispering to their neighbors, but enough that the sound filled the room. John smiled. "Thank you." I know this is unconventional, and I appreciate your understanding as we navigate this. If anyone has concerns about professional boundaries or fairness, my door is always open. Transparency is important to me, to Emily, and to the health of this organization. The meeting dissolved into smaller conversations. People approached me, some to congratulate me, some clearly just curious, a few with thinly veiled judgment in their eyes. I answered questions honestly, maintained my professionalism, and tried not to let the critics get under my skin. Susan hugged me fiercely when she reached me. I'm so happy for you, honey. You deserve every bit of this. The career success and the relationship. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. Thank you, I whispered, feeling tears threaten. That means more than you know. Over the next few weeks, the gossip gradually died down. The department numbers continued to improve, which helped. It's hard to argue with success. John and I were scrupulous about maintaining professional boundaries at work. We didn't display affection, didn't have lunch together except in group settings, didn't meet privately in his office unless there were legitimate business matters to discuss. But after hours, that was ours. We had dinner together most nights, either at his place or mine. We discovered we both loved cooking together. Him handling proteins and sauces while I managed vegetables and starches, moving around the kitchen in an easy synchronicity that felt natural and right. We watched movies curled up on the couch, argued good-naturedly about plot holes and character motivations. We took long walks through Forest Park, holding hands and talking about everything and nothing. The company continued to thrive. My automated systems were handling increasingly complex analytics, providing insights that drove strategic decisions at the highest levels. We'd begun serious discussions about international expansion, specifically targeting furniture markets in Canada and Mexico to start, with plans for European expansion within 2 years. John and I sat in on meetings with potential international partners, presentations conducted in English that showcased not just our products, but our data-driven approach to market analysis. I found myself speaking up more in these meetings, offering insights about consumer behavior patterns and market trends, and the international clients were impressed. One executive from a Toronto-based distributor specifically commented that our analytics capabilities were years ahead of anyone else in the furniture e-commerce space. The months flew by in a blur of work achievements and personal happiness. I'd never been so fulfilled in both aspects of my life simultaneously. My career was flourishing. My relationship with John deepened every day. We'd said I love you for the first time on a rainy October evening, both of us speaking at the same moment and then laughing at the coincidence that wasn't really a coincidence at all. By November, Henderson Home Furnishings had exceeded our annual targets by 37%, a record-breaking year by any measure, which meant the promised year-end celebration at Skamania Lodge was going to be spectacular. The company pulled out all the stops. They'd reserved the entire lodge for the weekend, arranged for gourmet meals, activities ranging from spa treatments to guided hikes, and promised a celebration dinner that would include recognition for the year's achievements. John and I drove to the lodge together. No more hiding, no more pretending. We were an established couple now, and while I still caught the occasional side-eye from skeptics, most people had accepted us. We checked into our room, a beautiful suite with a stone fireplace and a balcony overlooking the gorge, and changed for the opening reception. The lodge's main hall was transformed. Lights twinkled from the ceiling like stars. Tables were draped in the company's signature navy and silver colors, and a jazz trio played sophisticated background music. The atmosphere was festive, celebratory, proud. John gave his usual opening remarks, presenting the year's numbers on a massive screen. The growth charts looked almost vertical. Revenue up 42%. Customer satisfaction at all-time highs. Employee retention the best in company history. Plans for international expansion in the coming year that would double our workforce and triple our market reach. He recognized various employees for exceptional contributions, the warehouse team for achieving perfect inventory accuracy, the customer service department for their 5-star ratings, the marketing team for campaigns that had gone viral and brought in thousands of new customers. Then he got to my department. Our data analytics and business intelligence team has been the engine driving much of our success this year. Under Emily Rivera's leadership, they've created systems and insights that have informed every major strategic decision we've made. Emily, would you and your team please stand? I stood along with my team members, feeling proud not just of my own work but of theirs. They'd trusted me, followed my lead, implemented changes that weren't always comfortable, and delivered exceptional results. The applause was genuine and sustained. "Thank you," John said as we sat down. "Before we move to the celebration portion of the evening, I have one more announcement. Something personal that I wanted to share with all of you, the people who've become like family during my years with this company." My heart skipped. We hadn't discussed this. I had no idea what he was about to say. John's eyes found mine across the room, and he smiled. Not his professional smile, but the real one, the one that made his whole face light up. "Emily, could you come up here, please?" The room fell silent. I stood on shaking legs and made my way to the front of the hall, dozens of eyes tracking my movement. When I reached John, he took my hand, and I could feel the slight tremor in his fingers. He was nervous. Whatever this was, he was actually nervous. 10 months ago, John began, speaking to the room but looking at me. A young woman walked into my office to explain an automated reporting system she'd built in her spare time. I was impressed by her work, but I had no idea how much she would change my life, personally and professionally. Oh no, was he? "Emily Rivera, you are the most remarkable person I've ever known. You're brilliant and kind and resilient. You face challenges with grace, treat people with respect even when they don't deserve it, and somehow make everyone around you want to be better. You've transformed this company, but more importantly, you've transformed me." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. The room collectively gasped. My hand flew to my mouth. I know we haven't been together that long by traditional standards. Some people might say it's too soon, that we should wait. But when you know, you know. And I know without a single doubt that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to build a future together. A life full of love and laughter, and maybe a few more elevator malfunctions. People laughed at that, a warm, affectionate sound that broke the tension slightly. John lowered himself to one knee, and I felt tears streaming down my face. He opened the box to reveal a stunning ring, a princess-cut diamond surrounded by smaller stones that caught the light and threw rainbow sparkles across his hand. "Emily Marie Rivera, will you marry me?" For a moment, I couldn't speak. I was overwhelmed by emotion, joy and love and disbelief that this was my life, that this incredible man was kneeling before me, asking me to be his wife. A year ago, I'd been crying in my car, convinced my career was over and my relationship was falling apart. And now, yes! The word burst out of me. Yes, yes, yes! John stood and slipped the ring onto my finger, and then his arms were around me, and we were kissing while the entire company erupted in applause and cheers. I heard Susan's voice above the others. I knew it. I knew it from the beginning. The rest of the evening was a blur of congratulations and champagne toasts and people examining my ring with genuine happiness. Even the skeptics seemed won over by the moment, by the obvious love between us, by the fairy tale quality of it all. That night, alone in our suite with the fire crackling and the stars visible through the balcony doors, John and I talked about our future. We decided on a wedding 1 year from that date. Enough time to plan properly without waiting so long we drove ourselves crazy. We talked about children. We both wanted them, probably 2 or 3. We talked about the company's future and our role in it, about how we'd navigate the challenges of being married while working together. "I want you to know something," John said seriously, holding both my hands in his. "If at any point you feel like our relationship is affecting your career negatively, if people don't take you seriously because you're married to me, if you feel limited or constrained, we'll figure it out. You could move to a different department, or we could bring in someone to report to you so there's a buffer between us in the org chart. Your career is important, and I won't let our marriage derail it." "I know you won't," I said, touched by his consideration. "We'll figure it out together." That's what partnership means. "Together," he agreed, and sealed the promise with a kiss. The year that followed was magical in ways I couldn't have imagined. We planned a wedding that reflected both of us. Elegant, but not ostentatious. Meaningful, but not stuffy. Celebrating our love while honoring our faith. John, who'd never been particularly religious, started attending services with me. I taught him the prayers I'd grown up with, showed him how to find peace in stillness and communion with something greater than ourselves. He took to it more readily than I'd expected. "I always thought faith was about following rules and being judged," he told me one Sunday morning after service. "But the way you practice it, it's about gratitude and purpose and connection. That makes sense to me." We began praying together before major business decisions, asking for wisdom and guidance. When we faced a difficult choice about international expansion, whether to partner with a larger firm that could accelerate our growth or maintain full control and grow more slowly, we prayed on it for a week. The answer came clearly to both of us. Maintain control, grow sustainably, build something that would last rather than something that would burn bright and fast. That decision proved wise. Our measured expansion into Canada went smoothly, establishing a beachhead that would eventually support further growth. We hired carefully, trained thoroughly, and built a culture that matched what we'd created in Portland. My department grew from 12 people to 35. I hired talented analysts from top universities, trained them in our systems, and watched them flourish. Several of them came to me privately to say they'd turned down offers from bigger companies because they wanted to work somewhere that valued innovation and integrity over politics and posturing. The wedding itself was perfect. We held it at a beautiful venue overlooking the Columbia River, with 200 guests who'd become extended family over the years. Susan was my honorary mother of the bride, dabbing her eyes through the entire ceremony. My actual parents were there too, of course, my father beaming with pride, my mother already planning for grandchildren. When John and I exchanged vows, I looked into his eyes and saw my whole future. This man who'd believed in me when I was just a trainee with a dream, who'd protected me from persecution, who'd challenged me to be better than I thought I could be, who'd fallen in love with me despite, or maybe because of, all the complications. "I promise to be your partner in all things," I said, my voice steady despite the tears on my cheeks. "To support your dreams while pursuing my own. To be honest even when it's hard. To choose you every day for the rest of my life. I promise to honor you always," John replied, his own eyes glistening. "To see you as the exceptional woman you are. To never take you for granted. To build a life with you that reflects the best of both of us." Our first dance as husband and wife was to a classic jazz standard, moving together as naturally as we did in every other aspect of our lives. Later, during the reception, several people gave toasts. Susan's was particularly touching. "I remember when Emily first started at Henderson," she said, raising her glass. "She was this eager young woman who worked harder than anyone I'd ever seen. And I remember when John first looked at her, really looked at her, and I thought, oh, that man is in trouble. The good kind of trouble, the kind that changes your life. I'm so grateful to have watched their love story unfold. To Emily and John. To Emily and John," the room echoed. Our honeymoon was 2 weeks in Italy, a trip we'd been planning for months. We wandered through Rome's ancient streets, ate pasta in tiny trattorias in Florence, drank wine in Tuscany's rolling hills, and cruised along the Amalfi coast with the Mediterranean sparkling beneath us. We talked about everything and nothing, made love with the windows open so the warm Italian air could drift over our skin, and returned home tanned and happy and even more connected than before. When we got back, work was waiting, but somehow it felt different. Not less important, but properly prioritized. We were building something bigger than just a business now. We were building a life. 10 months after the wedding, our first child arrived. Sophia Grace Drake, born on a sunny October morning after 16 hours of labor that left me exhausted and exhilarated in equal measure. John held her for the first time with tears streaming down his face, this tiny person who was part of both of us, and I watched him fall in love all over again. "She has your eyes," he whispered, touching her tiny fist. "She has your nose," I replied, running my finger along her perfect profile. 18 months later, we welcomed Marcus Antonio Drake, named after John's father and my own. He came into the world loud and demanding, and from day one, his personality was entirely different from his sister's. Where Sophia was contemplative and careful, Marcus was bold and curious, getting into everything, testing every boundary. Balancing work and family was challenging in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. I'd always been someone who threw everything into my career, but now I had these two small humans who needed me in ways that weren't negotiable. John and I tag-teamed as much as we could. He'd take morning drop-off while I handled evening pickup, or vice versa. We worked from home when possible, brought the kids to the office occasionally when childcare fell through, and generally figured it out day by day. The company continued thriving. 5 years after I'd started as a trainee, Henderson Home Furnishings had locations in 4 countries, and annual revenue exceeding $200 million. My data systems had been recognized with industry awards. John had been featured in business magazines as one of the Pacific Northwest's top young executives. And together, we'd built not just a successful company, but a culture that people actually wanted to be part of. But the most important work we did wasn't at the office. It was at home, raising our children with the values we'd discovered together, teaching them about faith and prayer, about treating people with kindness, about working hard and maintaining integrity even when no one was watching. One evening, when Sophia was 5 and Marcus was 3, we gathered around the dinner table, a nightly ritual we protected fiercely, and Sophia asked, "Daddy, how did you and Mommy meet?" John and I exchanged glances, smiling. "Well," I began, "Daddy was my boss and I was a trainee learning about business." "But you fell in love at work?" Sophia's nose wrinkled. "That seems silly." "It does, doesn't it?" John laughed. "But sometimes the best things happen in unexpected places." We were just trying to do our jobs well, and somewhere along the way we realized we made each other better, not just at work, but at life. "Tell the elevator story," Marcus demanded. He'd heard it a dozen times but never tired of it, so we told them again, about the power outage, about Mommy being afraid of the dark, about Daddy holding Mommy's hand until the lights came back on. We left out the complicated parts, the betrayal, the sabotage, the professional complications, but we told them the truth about the important things, that sometimes you have to be brave, that good things come to people who work hard, that faith can guide you through dark times. After dinner, we did our nightly prayer together. John had become the one who usually led it, his voice confident and sure, in a way it hadn't been when we first started this practice together. "Dear God, thank you for this day and all its blessings. Thank you for this food, for the health of our family, for the opportunity to do meaningful work. Please guide us in the decisions we face, at work and at home. Help us to be kind when it's difficult, honest when it's uncomfortable, and faithful when we're uncertain. Watch over our children and help us raise them to be people of integrity and compassion. Amen. Amen," we all echoed. Later, after the kids were in bed, John and I sat on our back deck with glasses of wine, watching the stars come out over Portland. These were my favorite moments, the quiet ones, when it was just us and the life we'd built together. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" John asked, his arm around my shoulders. "If Melissa hadn't sabotaged you? If I hadn't offered you that challenge? If the power hadn't gone out that morning?" "All the time," I admitted. "But I also think everything happened exactly as it was supposed to. Every challenge, every setback, every moment of doubt, they all led here, to this, he agreed, pulling me closer. I thought about the journey that had brought us to this point. The trainee who'd been terrified of failing, crying in her car after being humiliated for a minor mistake. The woman who'd discovered her boyfriend's betrayal and felt her world collapse. The professional who'd nearly lost her career to someone else's jealousy and spite. That person felt like a different woman now, not because the challenges had broken her, but because they'd revealed what she was made of. She'd discovered reserves of strength she didn't know she possessed. She'd learned that faith wasn't about having all the answers. It was about trusting that there were answers even when you couldn't see them yet. And she'd learned that sometimes the best things in life come not in spite of our struggles, but because of them. The difficulties had shaped her, refined her, prepared her for blessings she couldn't have imagined back when she was just trying to survive each day. "I need to tell you something," John said, breaking into my thoughts. "I've been offered a position, CEO of Henderson Home Furnishings. Richard is retiring next year, and the board wants me to take over." I sat up straighter. "John, that's incredible. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because it changes things. The CEO can't be married to a department head, not directly. There would be too many questions about conflicts of interest, about whether you're getting preferential treatment." My heart sank slightly. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying we have options. You could move laterally to a different division, international operations maybe, or new market development. Or you could step up to VP of Data Strategy, reporting to the CFO instead of to me. Or," he paused, "you could take some time off, focus on the kids, and rejoin when they're older. I want you to choose what feels right for you, not what's easiest for me or the company." I thought about it carefully, praying silently for wisdom. The answer came clearly. I wasn't ready to step away from my career, but I also didn't want to be in a position where every achievement would be questioned because of who I was married to. "VP of Data Strategy," I said finally. Reporting to the CFO, it's a promotion with clear boundaries and it positions us both for continued growth without the appearance of impropriety. John smiled. That's what I was hoping you'd say. You'll be brilliant in that role. And I was. When John took over as CEO, I moved into my new position with a charter to expand data analytics across every division of the company. I built teams, implemented new systems, provided insights that drove decisions at the board level. And because I reported to the CFO rather than to my husband, no one could question whether I'd earned my success. The years continued to fly by. Sophia started school and showed an aptitude for mathematics that made me absurdly proud. Marcus discovered a love for building things, spending hours with blocks and Legos creating elaborate structures. John and I celebrated our 5th anniversary, then our 10th. The company continued growing, expanding into Europe and eventually Asia. Through it all, we maintained our nightly prayers, our commitment to faith, our dedication to living lives of integrity and purpose. When major decisions loomed, whether at work or in our family, we sought guidance not just from our own wisdom but from something greater than ourselves. I taught corporate seminars sometimes, speaking to young professionals about career development and navigating workplace challenges. I always told them the same thing. Your integrity is your most valuable asset. No promotion, no salary increase, no opportunity is worth compromising who you are at your core. Work hard, treat people well, maintain your ethics, and trust that the right doors will open at the right time. People would often ask about my rise from trainee to executive, about how I'd navigated the complications of falling in love with my boss, about how I balanced career and family. I'd tell them honestly, it wasn't easy, and there were no perfect answers. There were sacrifices and compromises and moments of doubt. But if you stayed true to yourself, surrounded yourself with good people, and had faith that things would work out, they usually did. Now, as I sit here reflecting on the past 15 years, I'm overwhelmed with gratitude. Gratitude for the challenges that made me stronger. Gratitude for the people who supported me even when I doubted myself. Gratitude for a partner who sees me as an equal, who celebrates my successes without feeling diminished, who builds me up rather than holding me back. I think about Melissa sometimes. I heard through the grapevine that she'd moved to another city, taken a position with a smaller company. I hope she found peace. I hope she learned from what happened. I don't hate her. How could I? In trying to destroy me, she inadvertently set in motion events that led to the best things in my life. I think about Ryan occasionally too, wondering if he ever understood what he threw away. But mostly, I feel grateful that his betrayal happened when it did. If he'd been faithful, I might have married him, built a life with someone who was wrong for me, and never discovered what true partnership could be. Every hardship, every setback, every moment I thought I couldn't go on, they all served a purpose. They were all part of a larger plan I couldn't see at the time, but can now recognize clearly. From reflection, if there's anything I want people to take away from my story, it's this. Your current circumstances, no matter how difficult, are not your final destination. The job that seems to be going nowhere, the relationship that's falling apart, the boss who makes your life miserable, the betrayal that breaks your heart, these are not the end of your story. They're chapters, sometimes painful ones, but they're leading somewhere. When I was crying in my car after being humiliated at work, I couldn't imagine that one day I'd be an executive at that same company. When I discovered Ryan's betrayal, I couldn't picture myself ever trusting someone again, let alone finding a love deeper and more meaningful than what I'd lost. When Melissa sabotaged my work, trying to destroy my career, I couldn't see that her actions would actually be the catalyst for my greatest professional breakthroughs. But God, or fate, or the universe, whatever you choose to call it, had a plan that was bigger than my limited vision. The challenges weren't random acts of cruelty, they were preparation, they were refinement. They were building something in me that couldn't have been built any other way. I learned that integrity matters more than advancement, that kindness costs nothing and pays dividends you can't measure. That working hard and doing the right thing might not bring immediate rewards, but they build a foundation that can support anything you want to create. That faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about trusting that there are answers even when you can't see them. I learned that the people who try to bring you down are often fighting battles you know nothing about. Melissa's cruelty came from her own insecurity, her own fear of being replaced, her own pain that had nothing to do with me. Understanding that doesn't excuse what she did, but it does make it possible to forgive. I learned that the right person, the right partner, the right leader, the right friend, sees your value even when you can't see it yourself. John believed in me before I believed in myself. He gave me opportunities I didn't think I was ready for and challenged me to rise to them. That's what good people do. They call out the best in you. I learned that you can't control what others think of you, but you can control who you are and how you respond to adversity. When people gossiped about my relationship with John, we couldn't stop them, but we could be transparent, maintain our integrity, and let our actions speak louder than their words. Most importantly, I learned that prayer isn't just about asking for things. It's about aligning yourself with a purpose larger than your own desires. It's about seeking wisdom instead of just outcomes. It's about developing the humility to admit you don't have all the answers and the faith to trust that someone does. When John and I pray together now, whether it's over a business decision or a parenting challenge or just in gratitude for another day, it's not about magical thinking or expecting divine intervention to solve our problems. It's about centering ourselves, remembering what matters, and finding the strength to do what's right, even when it's difficult. A prayer for you. Wherever you are in your journey right now, whatever challenges you're facing, whatever pain you're carrying, I want to offer you this prayer. May you have the strength to endure the difficult seasons, knowing they won't last forever. May you have the wisdom to recognize the lessons being taught, even through hardship. May you have the courage to maintain your integrity when compromise seems easier. May you have the faith to believe that your story isn't over, that better chapters are still being written. May you find people who see your worth and call out your potential. May you be brave enough to pursue opportunities that terrify you. May you be kind enough to treat others well, even when they don't deserve it, because that's who you are, not who they are. May you discover that the very things trying to destroy you are actually building something beautiful in you: resilience, compassion, depth, wisdom. May you learn to trust the timing of your life, to understand that delays aren't denials and that closed doors often protect you from paths that would harm you. May you find love that sees you fully and chooses you consistently. May you build a life that reflects your values, not other people's expectations. May you have work that feels meaningful and relationships that feel authentic. And when you reach the mountaintop, when you finally arrive at the success you've been pursuing, may you remember where you came from. May you reach back and help others climb. May you use your influence to create opportunities for people who remind you of who you were. May you never forget that your achievements aren't just about you, they're about what you can build, who you can serve, and the example you can set. Your valley season will end. The struggle you're in today is developing the strength you'll need for tomorrow. The betrayal that breaks your heart is making room for authentic love. The career setback that devastates you is redirecting you towards something better. Keep going. Keep believing. Keep doing the right thing even when no one's watching. Keep praying for guidance and wisdom. Keep treating people well even when they treat you poorly. Keep working hard and maintaining your integrity. Your breakthrough is coming. Your story is still being written. The best chapters are still ahead. And when you finally stand in the life you were meant to live, surrounded by people who love you, doing work that matters, at peace with who you are, you'll look back and understand that every single thing, even the painful things, was necessary to get you there. Trust the journey. Trust the process. Trust that you're being guided towards something better than you can currently imagine. Amen.